Tilea's Troubles, Part 126. Eyes and Ears of Different Kinds. Chapter 1. Somewhere in Tilean Forest. Autumn 2404. The spell-singer, Askel Arkenvale, could see that High Lord Veluthil was dreading the reports, for they might reveal something much worse than that which he already feared. Was the Ratmen army even greater in size than the most bloated of previous estimations? If so, the enemy might be willing to sustain the cruel losses that encroachment into the forest realm would inevitably incur, believing they could nevertheless retain sufficient strength to gain victory in a final battle. Did the Ratmen possess more of their terror weapons? Merely one such engine could fatally poison the very heart of the forest and instigate its complete ruin, transforming the sylvan realm of Tilean into a desert. Had the enemy already begun corrupting the forest's denizens, twisting them into servants of evil? Or were they introducing potent pestilences to moulder the trees and fatally infect the fauna? Apart from their novel war engine, all these things the Ratmen had attempted before, in ages past. There was no wickedness they would not stoop to, no danger they would not hazard, at least when it came to their own servants' lives. Theirs was a twisted, cunning genius, if grasping and impatient, which lured them down cruel and destructive paths. They loved only their own lives and power, looking upon all other creatures with disdain, even disgust. To them, everything was to be consumed or possessed, having worth only insofar as it could benefit their own selfish desires and ambitious cruelties. There was no destructive novelty so hazardous or dangerous that they would not attempt to harness it fully, going to the extreme, and what they had done near Campergrotta had proved they not only still possessed this predilection, but that they had the means to bring about truly massive harm. Kioran Brightmoon, commander of the Way Watchers, and Captain Hedray Eadwillow of the River Watch had come to deliver their reports. 2 weeks before, Lord Veluthil sent servants to all sides of the Campergrottan realm, on boats, on foot, on horseback, and even flying upon warhawks. He admitted to Askel that by doing so, the Ratmen would surely learn that they were being watched, but he considered it far more important right now to know as much as possible concerning the enemy's strength, disposition, and plans, than to remain hidden. Upon consideration, Askel thought it was no bad thing that the enemy knew they were being spied upon, intently and from all around, for it might make them think twice about encroaching further into the forest. Despite being thoroughly wicked and as cruel as devils, the Ratmen were also craven cowards. When the forest was angered, as indeed it was after the poisoning of its northwestern reaches, it took on a terrible countenance and became deadly dangerous to strangers. After the formal greetings such an audience required, and upon Lord Veluthil's instructions that they should both endeavour to be thorough and concise, Captain Hedray delivered her report first. She had ventured west along the river Ankar to learn that any who may have dwelt there had long since gone, with only a handful of signs of more recent habitation, perhaps little more than campsites where travellers had stayed but 1 or 2 nights. Upon approaching the city of Campergrotta, she encountered not just the first Ratmen in any real numbers, but also several engines within range of the river, one of which spat an unnatural lightning, which boiled the waters it touched into an ill-coloured steam. Knowing it would be suicide to remain, she ordered her vessel rowed away. Having nothing more to report, it was Kioran's turn. He had more to say, for he and his Way Watchers had crept much closer to the city, some few even going within the walls in the darkest hours of the night. "The city swarms with them, my lord, as one might expect of their kind. Counting them is no easy task, indeed quite impossible, for they scurry about incessantly, and from a distance look much alike. They are an army, and nearly all we spied were warriors. They have placed guards throughout the city at every portal, whether door or gate, and at every junction and bridge, with still more guarding the poor souls they have enslaved. We caught only glimpses of their war machines, for they are within the city walls." Lord Veluthil raised his hand to silence Kioran, asking, "Within the walls? Are you certain of this?" "Yes, my lord. They have several large artillery pieces, kept in the city squares with guards and attendants aplenty." Glancing over at Hedray, he added, we too saw one upon the walls, close to the river. Although others would struggle to notice, Askell could see a hint of relief in Veluthil's face, and she knew why. If the machines were kept close to the Ratmen, in the very heart of the city, then they could not be akin to the terror engine, for that had poisoned the very ground over which it had travelled, and destroyed all life in every place it rested. If such an engine were within the city, attended by many, then many would be suffering. And yet, Lord Veluthil was clearly not completely reassured, for he inquired further. Were the enemy in any way suffering weakness or illness, or showing any signs of injury? Not that I could see, my lord. And the engine's attendants and guards, were they like unto the rest of the army, garbed in the same manner, or were they masked, and swathed in robes and leather? Some, my lord, had masks, but not all and not many. Others elsewhere were also masked, even away from the engines. It seems to be a fairly common practice among their kind. There were robed warriors patrolling the roads about the city in strength, but they wore no masks. Curan had always been thorough, and Askell knew he would not be feigning knowledge he did not possess. "Did you ascertain the enemy's purpose?" inquired Lord Veluthil. "Are they making preparations to leave?" "There was no sign of such preparations, my lord, but they are present in strength, and well armed." "How so?" "They most commonly carry heavy-bladed pole-arms, somewhat akin to halberds, but considering how many also carry shields, these must be employed like spears. They act as any garrison would, eating, sleeping, watching. I myself saw one cooking up some kind of pottage in a great cauldron, the stench of which was foul. For despite the adding of herbs and berries, the fact that the flesh-meat had turned could not be concealed. I dread to think it, but I doubt it was the flesh of an animal. Beyond the usual activities of garrison soldiers, they have placed strange totems about the city, bearing rags or brass icons, even symbols, and sometimes a cluttered mess of several such things. The purpose of these I could not ascertain, for Ratmen do not seem to pray before them, or show any form of respect. Nor do they muster by them as they might regimental standards, or use them to mark boundaries of some kind, although such could be possible, I suppose, without being obvious to any but their own kind. They have no cavalry of any sort, but they have some brutish beasts, and the city swarms with rats, some as large as cats or even bigger, flitting around frantically in packs." "Have they sent out any scouts?" asked Veluthil. "Foraging parties? Are there any signs at all that they intend to march forth at some point?" "What few venture out do not go far," answered Curan. "As for supplies, they appear to have sufficient for their current needs within the city itself. My best guess, given all that I have seen, is that they are waiting. For whom or what, there is yet no sign." "My lord, they suffered casualties when their weapon exploded," said Askell, "and likely lost more in the fighting before and after that event, in the taking of the city. Despite their current strength, they themselves might consider their army too weak to pursue further conquest, especially if they intend to leave a force behind to garrison their newly acquired possession. Considering their past behaviour, their urge to swarm against their foes, it seems likely they are awaiting reinforcements." Lord Veluthil nodded gravely. "And when they receive them, what will they do next?" he asked. Askell presumed it was a rhetorical question. If the enemy were awaiting reinforcements, that would be bad enough. But should they bring another engine capable of the horrendous destruction of the first, then the situation was dire, and the need for action urgent. Askell held her tongue, however, for there was little she could offer by way of reassurance. Beyond simply risking everything in an attempt to attack and defeat the foe immediately, when such sacrifice might prove unsuccessful, even unnecessary, if the foe had no intention of advancing into the forest, she could think of no plan of action other than biding time, learning more, and hoping for some opportunity to present itself. If the Ratmen presently believed themselves to be weak, then considering their historic spinelessness when faced with real challenges, perhaps the Elves' best course of action was to attack as soon as possible. But fighting outside the forest would put Lord Veluthil's army at a great disadvantage, especially assaulting a walled city. On the other hand, waiting for the Ratmen to enter the shadow of the trees might prove too late to defeat them, especially if they had more terror weapons. Ifs and buts aplenty, thought Askell. Such was ever the way of war. She was glad Lord Veluthil bore the burden, while she had only to obey. Caught up in these rather unpleasant thoughts, Askell had not heard Kioran's last words, a fault she now sought to rectify immediately. "We did find the tunnel's mouth, which they must have used to approach the city from the south," he was saying. "Large enough for engines and presently abandoned. It looked to have been recently made, though within 100 yards or so beyond its mouth was what appeared to be a more ancient passageway, passing deep into the ground in complete darkness. I considered exploring further, but already several of our number had become too sick to journey onwards, an affliction which began when we crossed the river on the salvage vessels. The foul air within the tunnel exacerbated their illness, so we left and returned to the forest proper. I ordered the sick to remain in the Vale of Corcalan, there to be tended, while I came to you, my lord." Again Lord Veluthil nodded, and the company fell silent. At last he spoke. "There is much to consider, and to weigh. I will listen to what the Warhawk riders have to say before I decide our next act. In the meantime, consider the matter yourselves, for I may wish for further counsel." Chapter 2. Somewhere in Campa Grotta, Autumn 2404. Fargrin was not exactly happy this task had fallen to him, despite knowing that if he was now considered worthy enough to speak directly to Seer Lord Urlak Asher, then his own status had surely improved. His only previous encounters with Lord Urlak had been while handing missives to clerks, when he had simply been in the Grey Seer's vicinity, not expected to speak at all, and certainly not to Lord Urlak. He was more nervous now than he had been when out with the scout spies, with the enemy both near and watching. His heart was racing, his throat dry, his vision had blurred. He shook his head as if to rid it of the fog. As his surroundings refocused, he realised Lord Urlak was staring right at him.
"Well, speak, explain. What have you learned?"
demanded Lord Urlak. Despite how obvious it was, it still took Fargrin a moment to comprehend it was he himself who was being addressed.
"Elves, lord and master, great and noble, by which I mean to speak, say, not that the elves are great and noble, but you, mighty lord, great and—"
"Cease and stop your blather babble. Answer quick and to the point. You have but one single chance, here and now, to satisfy me, or I shall find someone who can and will, and you shall learn quick and painful what it means to disappoint me."
Fargrin sensed an increased malice in the yellow-clad warriors of Urlak's bodyguard regiment. They lurched, almost imperceptibly forwards, their clawed hands gripping their weapons' hilts and shafts a little tighter.
"We have seen spied elves, skulk-hiding in the green trees, watching, spying."
"And counting, no doubt. I myself know of the Skyhawks, yes, for I saw spied them with mine own eyes over the city. But you saw more. Where and what?"
"At the edge of the green trees, near close to the bridge at Terrano. Not many, but a few, with spears and bows and green cloth cloaks."
"On the far side of the river water?"
enquired Lord Urlak.
"Great and noble lord, no, on this here side, where the forest trees grow between the west road and the river."
"Then you were able to catch them, yes? With the river behind to prevent their escape flight?"
"We would and could, high and mighty master, if the trees had not been so thick close, and the elf things so slippery quick, and had there been more than 4 of us. The trees there, they are no copse grove, but many and more, for the forest itself crosses the water, then on for a width of nearly a mile, and more than a league long."
"A satisfyingly long list of excuses, I am certain sure, and all concealing your answer. You did not catch them."
Fargrin dreaded answering, for there was a hint of criticism and disappointment in Lord Urlak's tone, and it did not do to upset one's master. But as they had no elves to offer up, he could only speak truthfully.
No, your high and mightiness."
He was surprised when Lord Urlak's next words were neither threatening nor cruel, yet a part of him knew it would have been foolish to expect such. Lord Urlak was wise, and therefore had the measure of his servants. Only a fool would expect so few to catch fleet-footed elves in their own forest.
"Tell me, did they cross the river water by the bridge?"
"No, great lord. We questioned the guard soldiers there. Only our warriors have crossed. Nothing and no one else. Neither way and for many a day."
"Then they can cross the water some other way,"
mused the Grey Seer.
"The forest, you said. A mile by a league. Large and big enough to hide an army?"
Such a thing could stand within, but I assure and promise you, your mighty highness, there was no army there.
Yes, yes, but if they wanted chose, they could hide one there. Perhaps the trees ought to be destroyed, so that none remain north of the river, leaving nowhere for the enemy to creep and hide.
No one answered, as they knew Lord Urlak was merely thinking aloud, and would only have been annoyed by someone speaking. He turned to look at the claw leader also present.
And you, and your scouts, whither did you go?
Great lord, we crossed the bridge, south and southeast, to the very edge of the poisoned land. There we scour-searched, along each and every path, old and new, looking for signs of passage, and enemy foes.
And you found such?
We saw horse riders, a dozen or so, who fled escaped upon seeing us.
How many were you?
Inquired Lord Urlak, a hint of mockery in his tone.
6 and me, great lord, all ready, all keen.
And you think and believe the riders fled because they were afraid of you, yes?
The claw leader's eyes twitched, and his tail flicked involuntarily. His lips curled in fear to reveal his teeth as he spoke.
I would never and not claim such a thing, great and mightiness, only that they rode fast and past, away and not towards. They loosed no arrows, threw no spears.
They rode where they wanted to ride, simply spying you as they did so.
Yes, noble lord, yes. Too far away and too quick for us to reach them.
Lord Urlak shushed the claw leader with a gesture of his finger.
Riding errands hither and thither, carrying messages and dispatching their spies to creep and sneak. There's an army somewhere, I am certain sure. But will they emerge from the forest shadow? Have they come to assault, attack, or just to watch and wait? Either and any way. They should fear me. Now they know full well what I can do.